Switch gears a bit and talk about the FBI's new program targeting black identity extremists. Many are calling it COINTELPRO 2.0. Now, in 1956, the FBI launched the COINTELPRO program targeting activists who are fighting to advance racial equality. However, the 2.0 version of this program is not only targeting a group that many find to be unclear, but raises concerns that federal authorities may be racially profiling activists and prosecuting civil rights protesters. According to a leaked document from the FBI's Counterterrorism Division, the FBI says black identity extremists pose a growing threat to law enforcement due in part to aggression over, quote, alleged police abuse, like in the case of Michael Brown, an 18-year-old male who was shot and killed by Officer Darren Wilson in Ferguson, Missouri, back in 2014. The FBI report then goes on to detail specific cases of violence against police. One case the report highlighted was the 2016 incident where 25-year-old Micah Johnson shot and killed 5 officers in Dallas, Texas. The report states African Americans use police brutality as a means to justify violence. However, the number of police officers killed on the job is still just a small fraction of the number of civilians killed by officers each year. On top of that, statistics suggest every year white citizens kill more officers than black citizens. Joining me now to continue this conversation is Heidi Bogosian, former director of National Lawyers Guild and author of Spying on Democracy, Government Surveillance, Corporate Power, and Public Resistance. Thank you so much for joining me, Heidi. First, if we can jump into what are black identity extremists and why is the government declaring black identity extremists a violent threat?
The FBI document defines black identity extremists as individuals who engage in violence in response to perceived injustices against blacks. It also says that their goal is to form black government, black communities, their own black institutions. I guess it's kind of, in their eyes, black separatists. The danger, of course, is that this is very vaguely worded and could be seen, and I think will be used, to encompass activists, outspoken individuals who take to the streets, as we've seen with Black Lives Matter. And in fact, that's when the intelligence assessment characterizes the beginning of what they say is this problem.
Heidi,
I think it's a threat to free speech on many levels.
And Heidi, like you're saying, the black identity extremists, it is very vague and very unclear, and it's bringing up a lot of concerns with people, especially in the black community. Now, if you can detail for us, how is this different from the 1960s and 70s when the government focused on monitoring and even disrupting civil rights organizations?
I don't think it's different at all. That was under the government's counterintelligence or COINTELPRO programs, where basically when we had a surge of groups and individuals really speaking out for civil rights, equal rights, they were monitored by the FBI, they were infiltrated, and they were also the subjects of what we call dirty tricks, pitting individual activists against one another by things that the government did to really foment division in these activist groups. And I think we've been seeing that since Occupy, really since 9/11, where the Department of Homeland Security is actively monitoring groups. We saw the government labeling animal rights and environmental activists the top FBI domestic terrorism threat in 2005, in part because these groups are successful. And I think that's key to understanding this new intelligence assessment, is that Black Lives Matter has really changed the way a lot of Americans look at racial inequality in the nation. And they've become successful, therefore they're a threat to the government and the status quo. But I think we're going to see increased surveillance, increased monitoring by our, we have these, groups across the country that work with, in partnership with private entities and the government fusion centers, and I think they're sloppily run, they're poorly supervised. This gives them carte blanche to say that they are following threat assessments where really it's just vibrant speech.
Heidi, what do you say to supporters of this and who cite examples of violence against law enforcement by African Americans?
I would say that if they do their due diligence and read the statistics, in fact, more Caucasians have been responsible over the past 3 decades for shooting and killing police officers. I think there's about a 10% difference in the number of African Americans who have killed officers. And I think that we also need to look at factors such as mental illness, our gun laws or lack thereof, and the rise of white supremacists, especially under the Trump administration, where individuals feel free to take to the streets with brazen violence that we haven't seen in a long time. So I think the statistics show a different story than what the FBI is saying by this codification.
Heidi, we have about 30 seconds left. Can you quickly tell us what impact will this have when it comes to people taking to the streets in the near future?
I think it's not going to be a good impact. I think in addition to the kind of violence we're already seeing, it gives a reason for more white individuals and law enforcement, especially at all levels, to attack African Americans without reason and with a wantonness that I fear may not lead to a good future.
Heidi, thank you so much for this insight. That was Heidi Bogosian, former director of National Lawyers Guild and author of Spying on Democracy, Government Surveillance, Corporate Power, and Public Resistance. Thank you so much.